All right. Bob, delighted to have you here. Bob Bossin, I've known you for more than 50 years. Although we were at different universities, I was certainly aware of you. I was at Western. I was not the president of University of Western Ontario. I was just the president of the Students' Council. Didn't pay nearly as well. But it was an exciting time in the world. Lots going on. And Bob, you had a
Not like this.
well, we're going to talk about this in a second, that's for sure. We thought we were making some progress. Now it feels more like it's defensive action now.
Yeah.
um, so delightful, and thank you so much, Bob. My role has largely been sort of straight politics around the Israel-Palestine question, and so when I happened to fall on Facebook post, you posted something about Gaza. So it my ears perked up, not only because I've known you as sort of a progressive singer-songwriter for a long time, but also knowing that you're Jewish, to say, okay, that's interesting from my perspective as well. So I was thrilled when I approached you and asked if you'd spend an hour with us talking a bit about your life, where you are, and so on. So that's great. Bob, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure.
Now, just before we get into heavy stuff, Israel, Palestine kind of stuff, are you still stirring the waters with respect to current political issues? Are you writing songs about Trump or Trudeau or
Well,
yeah?
funny you should mention that because why I just happen to have my guitar right here. And this is not in any way related to Palestine, but on this of all days, this is a very current song that I wrote 48 years ago. But I got to do this today. I just have to do it today. When Sir Wilfrid Laurier was just a young shaver and his favorite thing was swimming in the river, he jumped in the water too soon after dinner, got a cramp in his leg and he would have been a goner. But his old farm dog come running when he called him and he saved Sir Wilf for the good of us all. That was a dog for time of trouble. His heart was big though his brain was small. That was a dog to come on the double to his master's voice or his country's call. Tribute to his scent was strong, his heart was true, the breed that we need today. Raise a cheer for the maple leaf dog, hip hip. And then you all say you're muted, hooray. When Sir Robert Borden and his new bride honeymooned at Niagara, Canadian side, they went for a trip on the Maid of the Mist. But the engine conked out and they started to drift. Just as he got down near the falls, a dog come swim for the good of us all. That was a dog for time and trouble. His heart was big though his brain was small. That was a dog to come on the double to his master's voice or his country's call. His scent was strong, his heart was true, the breed we need today. Raise a cheer for the maple leaf dog, hip hip hooray. Now you're New Brunswicker. He knows his lumber, and R.B. Bennett was of that number. He was working in the woods one day when a tree started falling and he was in the way. But his little dog barked and he jumped aside, and Bennett was the one who gave us EI. That was a dog for national youth. That was a dog for time of trouble. His heart was big, though his brain was small. That was a dog to come on the double to his master's voice or his country's call. Tribute to his master, credit to his race. He wagged his tail in der Führer's face. Raise a cheer for the maple leaf dog. Hip, hip, hooray, yay, yay. Your sheepdog's head looks a lot like his ass. Your collie dog is pretty, but she's working class. French poodle mount his mother if she wasn't too fast. Mexican Chihuahua, Rhodesian Ridgebacks, intolerant and crude. Turn around, your basset hound is doing something rude. But the maple leaf dog with snow on his nose, true patriot love in his sad brown eyes. The maple leaf dog ain't one of those. He's one of you and I. Excuse me. In 1942, when Mackenzie King didn't know what to do, walked his dog in the Kingsmere woods till he came in between a bear and her cubs. But little Pat barked and the bear withdrew, and soon King was telling Churchill what to do. That was a dog for a time of trouble. And when Louis Saint Laurent was a kid in Quebec, he walked his dog down the railroad track till the day his foot got stuck as a train was coming. But just his luck, an old red shirt was lying in the lane, and the dog grabbed the shirt and flagged the train. That was a dog for time of trouble. His heart was big though his brain was small. That was a dog to come on the double to his master's voice or his country's call. His scent was strong, his heart was true. The dog who rescued Uncle Lou. Raise a cheer for the Maple Leaf Dog. Hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray, hip hip hooray. And then in Edmonton years ago, little Mark Carney was buried in snow. Everyone searched till they gave up, all except for the family pup, barking, digging, wagging his rump. And but for the dog we could have oh no. That was a dog for national unity. That was a dog glorious and free. That was a dog to quell the mutiny, a dog to stand on guard for thee. Bop, 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 bop. That's the trumpet. Bop, 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 bop. Raise a cheer for the Maple Leaf Dog. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray. Yay, yay. Bow wow, bow wow. Mexican Chihuahua.
Wow. I haven't heard that for a very long time. Bob, do you remember what was the why did you what is it particularly apropos now after Trump tariffs come in, Trump speaking at 9 o'clock Ottawa time tonight, Trudeau's making very Canadian noises. But what was the inspiration for that song at that time? Was there something special going on politically at the time you first penned it?
Yeah, actually. There was an election coming up, and the Liberals were saying national unity was the big thing that was needed in trying to stir up patriotism, and that was my own version of patriotism. In fact, my friend Peter Froelich and I, in the autumn, I used to come out. He lived in Ottawa, and I'd come out there, and we go out in the Gatineaus, and that particular year, we went to Kingsmere, which is Mackenzie King's estate, which is quite a hoot in a lot of ways. But I had my old dog from the 60s and 70s, Roach, was there. And we got to the gate, and it said, "No dogs allowed." And Peter and I both began to berate the gate about the great dogs of Canadian history, and that's how it started. And it was one of the string band's most popular songs. It was the most requested when we did the box set of string band. But
Well,
the truth is, we're bringing it back, and Marie Lynn and I and Ben Mink have been working on that Carney verse, and we've inserted it into the old one. We're going to put it out there on the various social media and see if any of the CBC shows will play for it. The time seems to be right,
that's right.
48 years later.
So for those of us who joined perhaps while that was happening, my name's Peter Larson. I'm the chair of the Ottawa Forum on Israel-Palestine. I do regular monthly webinars on the Israel-Palestine issue, and I am thrilled to have with me an old friend, Bob Bossin. And so some of you will know Bob a lot better than you know me, and a few of you might know me better than you know Bob. But Bob is a singer-songwriter, folk singer of considerable repute, and now living out in Gabriola. It's almost 8 o'clock here in Ottawa, but it's the end of the afternoon where you are. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Bob, when we started this chat, I reconnected with you, and one of the things you suggested I do, and I did it happily, was read your book, Davy the Punk, the book about your dad and about your family. And also, I mean, I found it a very helpful, very instructive book because you grew up in Toronto in what would I call a Jewish environment. I guess I'm not exactly sure how to characterize it, but you were out of the book. I learned things like, your mother couldn't get a job Jews couldn't get a job on the floor of Eaton's. It was a time where anti-Semitism was still quite rampant, where they were, your parents weren't into going to university, but their peers would have faced quotas at university and so on. And you came up in that, becoming a progressive person, a progressive songwriter. And I'm wondering about the link between your Jewishness or your Jewish environment and the left-wing kind of causes that you took up and ended up singing songs about.
Well, it's funny. I don't know. I mean, I was left, as you say, or socially concerned from the get-go, and I mean, I like the vegetarian dinosaurs better than the meat-eating dinosaurs, and I don't really know where that came from. I mean, my parents were not political in certainly in any parliamentary sense, and or really in any normal sense of it. I mean, my dad was quite a rebel and onto an outlaw, as you'll know from the book. But other people in the family, I mean, some in the family were right wing all the time, and I had an uncle who I think was a communist in the 30s, and by the time I knew him, growing up in the 50s, well, it wasn't, I guess it was still CCF and then NDP, but I don't know, it just I always didn't like phonies. I mean, I think that came from Catcher in the Rye, which is a very popular novel at that point. Holden Caulfield hated the phonies, and I did too. Uh, but I don't know. It just, but when you think about it, I mean, that's a real core of Jewish teachings. I mean, it's said different ways by different rabbis, but uh, Tikkun Olam in Hebrew is to fix the world, or one of the other rabbis said, you may not be able to finish the job, but you can't shirk from it, and so on and so forth. I think there was I can't remember my old dead rabbis' names. Well, I can't remember anybody's names anymore, but one one of them said. Uh, all you need to know about the Torah is not to do to somebody else something you wouldn't want done to you.
Mm.
So that's a very old Jewish tradition, much older than the Zionist tradition. And in some ways, the Zionists were in reaction to that as they developed in the latter half of the 1800s. I mean, they wanted the Jews to be more aggressive and have a nation and have an army and defend themselves, and all this reading what these old dead rabbis said was they didn't like it. And that was part of the struggle within Judaism over Zionism, and eventually what led to the state of Israel and other things related.
I think I may have told you I went to high school in Toronto, and it was a school where there were quite a few Jewish kids. And I remember going to see Exodus when I was in grade 10, and I was just kind of blown away by it. I was sort of marginally aware of anti-Semitism as a phenomenon, and I went with some of my Jewish friends to see Exodus, and I was totally into it. I mean, just what you said, the Jews finally standing up, fighting, defending themselves, not being pushed around by the British, and so on and so forth. I was by grade 10, I was a committed Zionist. I wouldn't have known the name, I wouldn't have known the word, but I was completely with I thought the fact that Israel was created was a good thing and it was made the world a better place. It was a very strong feeling.
There was a very confused period in the Middle East from the end of the Ottoman Empire, Empire up to the creation of the UN and the creation of the State of Israel. And it was certainly true that there was some dispute and some violence between the Jews who had moved to that area starting kind of during the First World War and the British. But by and large, they were much more allies, and the British were much worse to the Arabs, although the British promised everybody everything and then didn't deliver. So overall, Exodus was wrong-headed, and certainly the notion at the end of the book, well, and in the movie, that this vast hordes of Arabs were going to ride in on their camels and attack was not historical
Right.
in any way, but there you go.
Do you remember having that feeling at that time, or is that sort of something you retrofitted as your?
Oh no, I didn't know at that time. I mean, I was like everybody else, and I mean I think it's partially just a quirk of history, a whole bunch of things combining that I think in that period, virtually all of us from, presidents and prime ministers down to preteens like me, bought this whole story about a land without a people for a people without a land who were coming in and making the desert bloom, whereas in fact they tended to be planting European trees that died.
Mhm.
All those trees that so many of us were given for our bar mitzvahs, trees in Israel, a lot of them were European conifers, and they didn't really work out all that well in the desert. Some did actually, some did stay. But no, I had no idea of the reality of that area where in fact it seems, as I've been learning about it, and I mean, one of the things I did after October 7th, realizing how little influence I could possibly have, is I just started to get serious about learning about the area and learning about the history, and not just taking the stuff I already believed. And it seems, in point of fact, although there were certainly skirmishes, but prior to the Europeans coming in, the different religions and different ethnic groupings, including Jews, including Palestinians, including various different kinds and castes of quote unquote Arabs, I mean, actually got along relatively well and probably better than the Europeans with one another. And again, it's just something that we didn't know. We bought the history that said that was essentially racist. That we were Europeans and we were smarter and we were going to go and help those people somehow by setting up in the area as if well, it's the same kind of silliness that gripped the world, but most of it 100 years earlier than
Right.
it did in the Middle East.
Did you end up going to Israel?
No, I never have.
Never went there. The stories, what you're saying there is consistent with stories I've heard from many. I've been there many times. Many Palestinians, many say, well, my uncle had a Jewish business partner or whatever. That doesn't change the fact. I'm absolutely certain that there were fights over water holes or whatever. That's sort of more in the nature of more village fictions kind of thing than anything significant. Um, um, Bob, what can you trace is your thinking now on the largely as a result of Gaza in particular, or have you been nurturing this for some time? How can you inform us on the evolution of your thinking?
Um, well, yeah, certainly not the latter. I mean, as I say, I mean, I grew up with the myths that probably all of us did. Um, I didn't think a lot about it as a kid or as a teenager. And then as I got, a little bit older and started to be a part of what is now the very old New Left, I mean, I was aware that there was an occupation along with all the others, but it wasn't one I gave particular thought to. And I guess initially, um, I mean, I probably did think, boy, there's a good thing. All these young people are forming kibbutzes, and it's a
Sure.
kind of socialistic thing. And I didn't know that there was uh, a civilization there that had been there for thousands of years. I didn't
Right.
know any of that stuff.
Mm.
Um, but I certainly could see snatches of ill treatment of the Palestinians at various times, and but then as eventually my wife Elizabeth Sheffrin, I mean she has been to the West Bank and has been to Israel and so for quite a number of years, really in many ways right up to October the 7th, 2023, she was kind of our family expert on things there. I mean, she knew it. She knew people. She was very sensitive, and I kind of left that to her and focused on environmental things. But then, as I alluded to, after October 7th, I thought, okay, I better start to learn here and really understand or see what I could try to learn about the area and then the history itself was such an eye opener and so in so many ways the opposite of everything that many people in Canada still take to be
Oh,
true. Certainly most of the politicians,
yeah.
and which is very frustrating.
Was there any book in particular that struck you? Do you remember?
I've been reading and I've been listening. I mean, I particularly like Ilan Pappé,
Mhm.
who's an Israeli uh, Oxford trained historian. He's now in his 70s. And uh, uh, well, to talk, we could talk a little bit about the history. Um, it's just so hard to know where to start. But prior to from the formation of Israel in 47, its acknowledgement as a state in May of 48, um, uh, what actually happened and what the myths were miles apart. And
Mhm.
no, and basically people didn't know. Israel was very adept at saying our soldiers fought a very difficult battle in this particular place. Well, it turns out that it was actually a massacre. That's what it was. There was no battle, but that was the story that was put out. Well, but nobody knew that stuff, and everybody felt, in many ways, quite rightly, for the Jews, because this is now just after the Holocaust, and there are people maundering away in refugee camps because countries like Canada still wouldn't take them.
Right.
People don't know. Up to 1949, I think Canada had the single worst record of taking Jewish refugees of any country that could take them.
Mhm.
It was a terribly racist history that cost thousands of people their lives who could have left Germany for Canada. They had relatives here that were all prepared to support them, and we, Canada, Mackenzie King's Liberal government, just blocked it at every stage in sneaky ways and open ways, and it was a very bad scene. So people, I think, were feeling guilty, and somehow the combination of those feelings, uh, Israel's way of describing events, went unchallenged. Well, for 35 years, the papers that were actually Ben Gurion's diaries, the papers that went back and forth with the British military, with the Israeli military. They were locked up. But at the end of 35 years, by both Israeli law and British law, they were opened up. And there was a bunch of young historians at that time, or young PhD, MA people looking for their thesis. And of course, you got to write fresh material. So all of a sudden, here was all this material, and they dived in, and all of a sudden, a totally different picture came out. Well, Ilan Pape was one of those historians, and he, I don't know how many books he's written now, 24 maybe, or certainly a dozen. And initially they were kind of academic, but eventually he wrote in a more public way, still very, very factually, and so I think his writing is very thorough. And also he's written, just this October, he published a very nice short little book called A Very Short History of the Israel-Palestine Conflict, which is a really good starting point if you don't really want to get into the details of it all. So that was influential, but to me, I mean, I don't think you have to know anything about the history, although it's very useful and very good to do it, to see that, as has happened in the last few days, Israel says, well, we're not going to let any food or medicine into the country with how many million people are there still alive. I mean, I don't know how you could think that was right. I certainly don't know how you could follow any traditional Jewish teaching and think that was a right and decent thing to do. And so to look at the carnage and the destruction in Gaza, I mean, look at them blowing up statues, blowing up archives, blowing up museums, and except as you're willfully so supportive of Israel as a Jewish state, I don't see how you could look at that as something other than genocide, or maybe you don't know the technical definitions of genocide, which it meets in spades. But so, I mean, that doesn't take a lot of knowledge. So watching that stuff go on in the first months after October the 7th, 23, I mean, I remember when October 7th happened, I thought, oh, this, I mean, aside from whatever awful stuff happened on October the 7th and 8th, I just thought, this is going to be awful. And I never dreamed it would be as awful as it is. So I mean, the part of me that just responds to the genocide, it doesn't need to know the history. But if you do know the history, and if you do know the history of the different Jewish factions around the creation of Israel and where Israel is, you start to see that this genocide is part of a pattern of ethnic cleansing that's gone on since 1947, and it's been consistent.
Bob?
Yeah.
Bob, I think I feel a song coming on.
Oh, I think I know the one you mean. Yeah, I wanted, I looked around for something to sing, being an old protest singer, and this was a song that Leon Rosselson, the great British writer of political songs, wrote in when Israel was bombing Gaza in 2014. And I know Leon, I've played with him over the years. And I wrote him and I said, what about, updating it a bit? And Leon's 92 now, and he said, you do it. And so we went back and forth, and this is the kind of our co-write. Okay. I was watching the news from Gaza when I closed my eyes in despair. And when I opened them up again, a young girl was standing there. She said, "My name is Rivka. They killed me because I'm a Jew. I died in the ghetto of Vilna in 1942. The ghetto was like a prison. They wouldn't allow us to leave. Some said they were going to kill us all. We didn't know what to believe." That day I wore my new red dress my Bubby had meant for me. And in the crowded ghetto, it made me feel proud and free. I looked up at the soldier, I looked him in the eye. I forgot to bow my head down, and so I had to die. He smashed my head with his rifle because I was too bold. I was killed in the Vilna ghetto when I was 7 years old. And then from out of the darkness, a young boy's gaze met mine. He said, "My name is Muhammad. My country is Palestine. I lived all my life in Gaza, and the only time I feel free is when I go down to the harbor and feel the wind from the sea." That day I went with my cousins. We ran down to the beach to play, and a soldier fired a shell at us and blew my life away. They think they can crush our spirit. They want us to be afraid, locked up in the prison of Gaza, the prison that they have made. We're not their children. Our lives mean nothing to them. I was killed on the beach at Gaza the day that I turned 10. They call us human animals, and they are the chosen race. Muhammad, my brother, said, "Rivka, this world is a cold, cold place." Muhammad, my friend, my brother, let us leave this world of war. Then each took the hand of the other, and they were seen no more. There I was, alone again, watching the evening news, and every face was a mannequin's, and every phrase an excuse for all of the children murdered, and all of the leaders' lies, and all who look the other way and turn a deaf ear to the cries. But I will not keep silent or pretend I hadn't known, and may our voices raised together have the force of water on stone. And may all of our voices together have the force of water on stone.
I've been down to that beach, Bob. I was in Gaza in 2018 during the Great March of Return. And I remember I got the chance to spend a couple of hours with a young class of young women who were learning English. And so I became sort of the English teacher for the afternoon. And we were talking about travel and how they'd all want to travel and leave there, go somewhere else. And then I asked them, where would you like to live? And they all said they want to live in Gaza. And I guess I'm a bit of a chauvinist. I was shocked at that. I assumed everybody would want to leave Gaza. And I said, why would you want to live here? And I said, well, it's where my family's from, my girlfriends are from, my boyfriend, my parents, my grandfather's buried here. They had that attachment to the land that they were definitely going to stay there. And it was sort of a bit of an education for me because I was looking at it from the eyes of of a Canadian who moves around. You live down in Gabriola, grew up in Toronto. I grew up in Montreal, Toronto, or whatever. I didn't have the same attachment to a specific place.
There's the second season of Mo, which is a comedy um, starring a Palestinian. Well, he's a comedian normally, a stand-up comic, but it's a dramatic series. It has just come out. It's not, the comedy isn't really to my taste, but the last episode of it was one of the most moving things I saw. We, to be honest, we watched the first couple, and I had heard about the last episode and skipped to the last two. But in the last two, Mo, who the character is a kind of undocumented foreigner from Palestine in America, and they go back to Palestine, and it's a wonderful little piece of drama. It's very warm and very uplifting, and they got it. They got something. I mean, I don't know.
It is available on Netflix, and Mo actually is going to be here in Ottawa in a week or two. Someone told me that today. I can't remember if that was around. I want to suggest, Amy, I see that Peter Lebensold has his hand up. Anybody else who wants to ask questions of Bob, please raise your hand, and I will flip over and make it possible, Peter, for you to talk. Peter Lebensold. Just a minute. I say.
He's muted. I can see that.
I'm trying to ask to unmute. Maybe you may have to unmute yourself, Peter. I've got. Let's see. No, you've got permission to talk. It's not working out very well. And I'm gonna. Why does that? Ask to unmute. You click on ask to unmute. Peter, you're trying to talk, I assume. I can't. Are you mute? You're not muted at your end, Peter, I hope.
No.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, there he is.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm not aware that I raised my hand. I've been so in listening to the two of you chat. So you may want to move on to somebody else.
Okay. Is there someone else who wants to? I saw another hand go up and it disappeared too. So, okay. David Nuppert. David, allowed to talk. There we go. David.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Bob. I've been reading some of the books you mentioned, and a couple of other ones, and now reading one by Peter Beinart. But I wanted to ask about the idea of Jewish supremacy, and is that idea new, or is it just due to the right-wing government? And what, if so, what does that mean for the future of Israel? Is there a future for Israel the way things are going now? And finally, I'm like you. When I see you focus on the genocide per se, I don't understand why our government can remain silent, and so it's very frustrating. So sorry, there's a lot of questions there, but really, it's the concept of Jewish supremacy, what they're doing. Is there a future, and the lack of response from our government?
Wow.
Well, I can respond to a few of the things. I mean, Jews are like any other, they're like Christians, they're like plumbers, they're like any group you can name. There's a lot of different attitudes. There seems to have been a myth abroad that somehow we all felt the same thing and the same loyalty to Israel, and that was certainly became a dominant strain. But going all the way back, there are really different attitudes. I mean, there were Jews who said of the idea of Zionism, of the idea of returning to Israel, said, "Are you crazy? Why do we want to go there? What we want to do is live here as Jews, as good people, and go away." On the other hand, my grandfather bought a bond in the future Israel in support of the future Israel, which is still in the family. So I think in Israel now, I mean, I'm not the expert by any means, but one of the things I read, I can't remember where I read it, was that the first generation of Israelis were very different than the subsequent generations. I mean, there was still ethnic cleansing going on, and there were massacres that anybody who wants to know about now can find out about. But there was it was very different. But once Israel was established and the education system came into effect and the compulsory military training came into effect, the understanding for the Palestinians and people who had lived in that land just went out the window. People seem to have been trained away from it. So what had been the left gradually atrophied, and people who felt that somehow this was the Jews' right and nobody else's right to this land. Then, as they tried to build more settlements, one of the things that happened was the people who came into the settlements had a particular view of a greater Israel, the land of Judea, and they were different again from the other religious Jews who hearkened back to the rabbis. So Israel is pretty divided. It does not seem to be divided in favor of this genocidal war, genocidal attack on everything in that little space of the Gaza Strip. But in terms of where they want Israel to go, how they want it to be, I've seen a number of people say it's not sustainable. You can't sustain that constant state of warring, which they have been in and seem to want to continue to be in. A lot of the more liberal Jews are leaving, Jews who can, go and make a good living somewhere else. I mean, far from being the place where Jews are safe, it's the most dangerous place on earth to be a Jew. So in the long run, I don't know. I mean, I'm not close to it, but it makes sense to me that its internal contradictions will be very hard. And unfortunately, in Canada, certainly the Trudeau government, and I was interested, I watched at least part of the English Liberal leaders debate. I mean, they don't, the people up at that position, I think they still think that Jews in Canada are all solidly behind Israel, and they don't dare apply the same logic they apply to the Ukraine, to the situation in the Middle East. So it would be nice if we could make that change and Canada could recognize a Palestinian nation. It doesn't seem to be a hard thing to do, but we've been unwilling to do it all these years.
Bob, yeah, I think you told me your wife is Jewish. I presume you probably have a lot of Jewish friends. What's the evolution? Can you generalize the evolution of their thinking on this since October 7th? You're obviously staking out a pretty strong anti-Zionist position. Does that mean that you lose touch with your Jewish friends or not? And what happens?
I've lost a couple. Actually, one was very interesting. I sang that song, Rifkin Muhammad, at an event here. It wasn't a British political songwriter I brought in, and I sang it at the opening. So it wasn't a Palestinian event. And one quite good friend who's Jewish got up and walked out and canceled our dinner invitation for a week or two later. but that's come back around, and I'm really happy for that. I've had several people break off the Facebook relations because they were troubled by things I was reprinting from particularly Gideon Levy and Haaretz writers. But others, there's somebody I'm thinking of who we disagree, and we've stayed in touch, and I'm really pleased with that. And there's been there's somebody I blocked who just was he had his own beliefs, but they started, in my view, to amount spreading misinformation, and I just didn't want to deal with that anymore. So there's been a bit of that, but most of the people I know are what I would call progressive, or I mean, some of them still vote NDP or they vote Green. Well, we actually had one of the few Green MPs in the riding I live in. So the battle here is, well, anyway, we now have an NDP member,
Right.
but I have friends who are really afraid for people in Israel, and believe that there's a lot of people around them who would kill them if they could. I think that's true, and it's hard to blame the people who feel that way, because that's how the Israelis feel about them and how they've been acting, except that they're successful, far more successful at killing the people they think are less human than they are. Well, I don't know. I mean, Jews, what's the old joke? You have to have, if you have one Jew, you have to have two synagogues built, one for him to worship in and the other that he wouldn't go into no matter if you paid him. I mean, we tend to disagree about things like Zionism right from the get-go.
Right. Right. Bob, have we got time for one more song? Have you got another song in your kit there you can share with us?
Okay, I have to retune a little for this one. This is actually another song that I heard along about that same time when the attack and the destruction was really happening, and I was feeling so frustrated and helpless. And of course, meanwhile, then Trump won. People chose Trump. And I got to thinking about something I.F. Stone used to say, which was you gotta cheer for the losers, because you lose and you lose and you lose until somebody eventually wins, and would not have but for that. So I combined that with Peter Morton's song and wrote a whole new version, and eventually sent it to him. I don't know him. He's another British songwriter, with some trepidation, and he was great. He said, go for it. So the beginning is now. It always is. You say you missed your chance. I don't believe you did. You say you're done. But what I'm saying, there's no such thing as done. There's another train. There always is. The next one could be yours. Get up, climb aboard another train. You got shot down, you got knocked around. Been there, done that, not the first time in this town, not the last round. You don't win. Pick yourself back up, spit, and go in again. There's another train, there always is. next one could be yours. Get up, climb aboard another train. We fall on our ass sometimes, or we try too hard. Then we fill our heads with crazy thoughts that only break our hearts, but hearts will mend and mend again. Listen. Hear that whistle in the distance, there's another train. There always is. The next one could be yours. Get up, climb aboard another train. And so we live to fight again, until someday at last somebody wins. And if you're not there on that fateful day, listen, you can hear that old whistle blow a mile away. There's another train, there always is. The next one could be yours. Get up, climb aboard another train.
Bob, while you're seeing that, I'm thinking of the dozens of videos I've seen on TikTok recently of Palestinians in Gaza rebuilding, sweeping up the debris, reorganizing their houses, trying to open a restaurant, trying to move ahead. And the human spirit doesn't give up. And I think that's your song is a song of inspiration for all of us. I do remember having a conversation with a young Palestinian woman, Haneen Zobi, in Israel. She's an Israeli member of the Israeli Knesset. And I was leading a group of Canadians there, and one person asked her, "Do you think you're ever going to resolve this?" And Haneen's answer was, "I don't know, but I'm a Palestinian woman. I have no option but to fight, and I will fight as long as I can." And it was, to me, a great inspiration. I see a request here. Can you do the Lady Godiva Memorial Band? Can you do that?
No, actually I was even leader of the Lady Godiva Memorial Band, which is the engineers band at U of T. And the remarkable thing was I was an artsman, and we kept it secret all year. In fact, I had an English teacher who thought, "Well, isn't that great? This engineer is auditing my class." But I wasn't. But we were a long way from my politics at this point. Actually, I had the same politics, but I loved the Lady Godiva Memorial Band.
Speaking of politics, you must tell us this one story that you mentioned in your Facebook post about being the representative of the Israeli team in your summer camp. Tell me how that went.
Well, I went to a summer camp called Rolling Acres. I loved it dearly, and I went year after year as a camper, and then became, as people around those camps will know, a CIT, counselor in training, and then a counselor, and then I finally grew up and left the island in a sense. But another counselor came and said, "Hey, we should do Olympics." And here's how it worked at this other camp we were at. And for a week, everybody prepared. And then we had opening ceremonies and all these different athletic contests. and we should divide the camp into 4 teams, each for a country. And Bob, why don't you take one of the teams, whatever? So I chose Israel because we could wear fatigues, and I mean, I had gone to Hebrew school, and I mean, we sang "Shock Troops of Palmach." I mean, you know, I mean, I didn't think anything of it. It seemed like a good thing. I don't know. Anyway, so we were Israel, and as it turned out, we won. And then I think that may have been my last year at the camp, just by chance. But then Israel won again, I think 2 more years, and the camp decided to change all the teams because it was starting to look like it was a Jewish camp. So that was the story. That was the story. I did it because I knew the music. I had some music, and we could
Right.
wear our military clothes and not have to, or our sort of camper khaki clothes or khaki clothes, and not have to do a whole bunch of things, and we could march around like we were militaristic. It
Bob,
was a long way from now.
Bob, it's a great honor for me, a great pleasure for me to see you again after all this time. You've been a star on on my horizon for a long time. I've known of you for a long time, never known you really well. I'm now feeling I'm starting to move into that terrain where I feel I'm getting near the end of the runway or near it, and I want to start linking back with all kinds of friends that I knew at different stages in my life. And it's a real pleasure for me to hear you, see your smiling face, and hear your somewhat iconoclastic tunes, and also to talk to you specifically about this terrible situation today in Gaza. And I think I know that you and I and many others are leaning as far as we can into this to try to, at the very least, get the Canadian government to take a position forcefully and in favor of human rights and international law and so on and so forth. So, Bob, thank you so much for spending an hour with us. I know that everybody's appreciative of that. And on behalf of the Ottawa Forum, I can't thank you enough. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.